Our first person we have today is the illustrious Mr. Bill Waldrop. I'm going to play a short video clip that he was recognized for yesterday. If you tuned in to the GVATA business session, Dr. Barbara Wall presented him with a golden key. And we're going to play one of those videos for you real quick. And then we're going to let Mr. Bill share some things. Looks like he's also from the tailgate again. So let me share my screen. And we're going to rock and roll.
Good morning.
Y'all hear that?
Hey. It's a wonderful
Justin,
morning.
can you hear that?
Joe is beautiful out this morning. We're here for another lesson from the tailgate. You know, this would be lesson number 3. All right. I don't know. Things are going on. We're going to do some plant identification this morning. But before we start that, I got criticized for not having good activating strategies of class starters. So, this morning, beautiful morning, the sun's coming up over the hill there from the east, and we're going to start with a little yoga. We all know that yoga is good for our mind, good for our brain, good for our heart, good for our body, good for our lungs, all that kind of stuff. So, just follow along with me. We're going to get in this position right here, and we're going to hold it for a little while. Hey, you know what? I was held this position for 43 minutes. Then I got up and flushed. Oh, man. All right, that probably wasn't funny to you, but I don't know. All right, what I did. It's been 3 times 3 plus 3 days since I've seen you. We have a lot of plants that are changing a whole lot. When I hold them up in front of this camera, I hope you can see them really good. I don't know. All right, but we're going to try it anyway. All right, what plant are we going to start with? This one looks a lot different than it did 3 times 3 plus 3 days ago. Did you know it? I know you know it. Think about what we talked about before it had leaves on it, because this is a deciduous plant. Make sure you know what deciduous means, okay? Make sure you know what deciduous means. Look it up if you don't, but surely y'all know it, all right? So what characteristics do we still have? Hey, I don't know if you can see it. Hollow stems. What other characteristics? Got linner cells all up and down the stem, but now it has leaves on it. Right? So what is unique about this plant and its leaves? Look at it. I don't know if you can see it. We're going to try it. You should see serrations around the top half of the leaf and smooth margin around the bottom. Probably not the only plant in the world that has that, but the only plant on your list that you got to know, right? Do not miss this plant ever. Dr. Claxton down there from Perry used to think it's the funniest thing in the world. With students from Forsyth, Miss Forsythia. Don't miss it. Next plant. Oh, wow. Wow, this one looks good. This is kind of a specimen plant in most people's yards. Look that word up. Make sure you know what that means. Right? What is common about what we knew 3 times 3 plus 3 days ago? All right? Opposite stem attachment. Opposite leaf attachment. But you didn't have leaves 3 times 3 plus 3 days ago, all right? But the buds attack the opposite. You still see them. Purplish, green, flimsy stems. This is a Japanese maple. You know that.
All right, Bill. You want to go ahead and take it from there?
Yeah, I can. Yep, that's good. Can you hear me all right? All right, I just lost my screen, so hopefully I'm fixing to be. I can't see myself right now, but I wanted to show you a few things. But to begin with, I think Katrina made a very good point in the plant science meeting yesterday about plant identification just being of the utmost importance. If we're teaching nursery landscaping, trying to prepare students for the careers in nursery landscaping, they've got to know plant identification. It doesn't matter if they wind up working in a nursery, doing lawn maintenance, landscape contracting, landscape design, landscaping architecture. Probably one of the most important things besides them just having good work ethics and being able to learn is plant identification. But we all know that plant identification can be pretty boring for teenage high school students most all of the time. So what I do, I try not to throw a whole list at them at one time, 10 plants a week, sometimes 12, 13 if they all match up. But I try and figure out some little way, some little trigger to make students remember the plant. And I gauge them as I'm going over the plants, because when all of the eyes just glass over, it's time to do something crazy, do something stupid, or just move on to something else. Because if you're on your 8th plant of the day and you've only got 3 of them's attention, even if you were planning on doing 12 or 13 plants that day, you might as well stop. So I just want to be able to show you just a few things that help students trigger things and help them to remember things. I'm going to show you a camellia first. And whenever I show a camellia, I start talking about that camellia. And I start talking about how it has alternating leaf attachments, that it's evergreen. I start talking about how it does best in morning sunlight, not full sunlight. I talk about how it blooms, typically late January, February, March, just a wonderful bloom, because we're not always doing the ID when it's in bloom. But at some point, some student says, will you quit rubbing the edge of that leaf? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't even know what you're talking about, rubbing the edge of that leaf. And the edge of the leaf, the margin of the leaf feels like a hacksaw blade. And just by doing that little thing and just continuing to do it, even though I'm grading the nerves of my students, when I see them doing their test, every single one of them picks it up and does this, and then they look at me and smile like they're all great because they're going to get this one right. They might miss the other however many plants on the test, but they know they're going to get the camellia right. Another little thing I do, when I'm talking about this tree, I don't know if you can see it. I'm in a little block on my screen, but I hope my head might be in the right place. But y'all all know this is a yellow poplar leaf. And I make this little mask, and I start talking about, forestry teachers are going to call this a yellow dash poplar. Nursery landscaping is just going to call it poplar with a comma and then yellow. Your parents are probably going to call it a tulip tree. Your grandparents are probably going to call it a tulip poplar. So that makes it the mass thing triggers with my students, knowing it's a yellow poplar, but it also gives me a chance to talk about scientific names and the importance of scientific names. So when we do later on go over scientific names, I can reference the yellow poplar, the tulip tree, and then, when you bring the yellow poplar sample into class and you do this, you better have 2 samples, because you're going to lose all of your leaves really fast, because even 17 and 18-year-olds are going to make this mask and walk around school with it the rest of the day. All right, one more little trick I got. Y'all know this is a forsythia, and I live in Forsyth, and we have a big forsythia festival. But whenever I'm going over forsythia, I always reach in my pocket and pull out a couple of stems, And I tell them when I'm running from the U.S. Marshals or the GVI or something, I can always just dive down into a swamp or a creek, and I got a breathing apparatus automatically in my pocket because it has this hollow stem. One student's going to ask me, when do you run from the U.S. Marshal? And I didn't mean to say that, but, we'll use a different example, okay? Some of you don't like plastic straws, do you? You think they're going to kill the environment. Heck, carry this thing to McDonald's with you and drink your Coke out of a forsythia stem. And, if they remember to look at the forsythia stem, they won't miss forsythia. And one last thing, I always try and use right off the bat, like the first or second week of school, is Glossolabilia. And I had one more plant this morning, and it had pink and orange and stuff in it. But it's good when we buy plants not to just leave them out behind the school, because it disappeared on me. And I don't know what the heck happened. But anyway, I show this one to let them know that you can't just ID plants on color alone. Color's a good factor, but like abelia, there's many different varieties and cultivars of abelia. So that gives me a chance to talk about varieties and relate back to something they've seen when we get there. But like I said, I think plant identification is just critical to preparing students for the nursery landscaping industry. But at the same time, it's really hard to keep students focused for a long period of time and on plant identification. So any little thing that triggers in their mind that you can think about, I can talk about dogwoods for an hour in a class and things like that. And I talk about azaleas. When we started identifying azaleas, I talk about the masters and just things to trigger in their mind when they're trying to remember these plants, I think is good. Typically with plant identification, like I said, I'll try and start out with 10 or 12 plants the first week and then add more to it and try and give them a little plant identification test on a weekly basis. Sometimes things like the fair and livestock shows and competitions get in the way of it. But my goal is pretty much every Friday to have a plant identification test that my nursery landscaping class or my horticulture class would take. Hopefully that was a little entertaining. I know the video, I'm proud of Walt. The last time I was in one of these Zoom meetings with the CTAE Advisory Committee, Dr. Wall talked me up about my video. So I introduced my video and told him what I was doing. And then the people at the Department of Education couldn't figure out how to play it. So thank you, Walt. I know on my screen it was a little jumpy, but I hope that you got the effect that you've got to keep students interested in plant identification. You just can't just show them plants and expect them to learn them. You got to be able to try and entertain them a little bit. I think I will pass it on to somebody else unless there's something specifically else I need to say right now. And I might jump back in later on ideas of other things. Good.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any specific questions for Bill?
Or ideas?
Hey, Bill, one of the things that I do, and this is more forestry, but I think it kind of plays on both, is like we'll go out. I use note cards, right? And so I'll take kids out and we grab 5 note cards going out the door. And we go through a lot of the same stuff that you just did. I'll have the kids write the common name. Is it deciduous? Is it evergreen? Some things, that are pertinent to the specimen, whatever. And then they kind of make flashcards with it. You know what I mean? And that's what I use. Do you use any like note-taking methods, or do you recommend the kids, how do you approach them keeping their notes together? Do you do anything specific?
I've gone back and forth on that. For years, like on tree ID and forestry, I would make them write down the characteristics, just kind of in their notebook, just like 4 characteristics about each tree or and plant ID. And then, I've kind of just left it up to the students. If a lot of them just immediately, when I start talking, they start taking notes. But then I also have a lot of really good students who can do really good at ID, who try and learn it their own way. And the danger there is when we get to competitions, or if they're out in real life, the sample might not look exactly like the sample I look. But I've the last 3 or 4 years, I've really relaxed phone use when we're doing ID, and I tell them take pictures. And when I get different samples, I tell them to take another picture and make a slideshow with it or whatever. But that phone that they can sit there in class before they do their test and run through those pictures, I think that's improved my students' ability to learn the plants probably more than anything, just using that phone to do it with.
That's good. That's good. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, and Dr. Flanders says You should see Bill do the Creed as Ric Flair. That's a pretty awesome video. I've seen that one too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. All right. We thank you again, Bill. And that's some great stuff that you share. We appreciate it. Next, we're going to have Miss Katrina Pollard is going to discuss some things. And I've allowed you to have the opportunity to share your screen, Katrina, so take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Every time that I talk, I remind everybody that if you're interested in being part of the Ag Teacher Google Drive, to send me an email, and when I'm done talking, I'll type my email in there for you. If you've already emailed me and sent me your email, then you should already be in the Ag Teacher Share Drive. It is a plethora of resources from teachers all across the country. People put stuff in and are able to glean from that. Also, there is the Ag Teacher Share Facebook group that, although it is not specific to Georgia, it's a lot of Georgia ag teachers and then some other people from across the nation. So something that Cecily Gunter and I started whenever she was teaching nursery landscape way back in the day, we like to eat. If I can do something with food in my class, then I'm going to do it. And so after Christmas one year, there was a huge sale on gingerbread houses. And so typically we do this project after we've already talked about all the principles of landscaping and stuff like that. It's like a culminating project. And so we took those gingerbread houses and we let the kids bring in a bunch of different candy, like we assigned candy so that that's less cost on us, and they can use the candy that comes in the box. And we create a gingerbread house using the principles of nursery landscape. And so I've got the rubric and kind of the explanation pulled up. When I was at Burke County, my predecessor had all of this like 3D model kit stuff, and we would create them out of like little wooden houses and all of the stuff that they use for like model train sets. But I didn't have that when I came to Newton County. So I was like, what can I do to kind of replace that? And so the gingerbread houses were a cheap alternative. And so the students have to create a blueprint of their design. They have to sketch it out to scale. Then they create their 3D model. And then most of the time I put them in small groups of like 2 people. And so that does pretty good. And so this is just a synopsis of what they do, and I'll share that in a minute. And then another project, there's a standard for turf grass management. And so I give them a golf course project. And so their job, we start off, they have to write a paper, about the history of golf. And so, of course, they're like, oh, I have to write a paper. But then they're talking about golf. And
hey, Katrina, if you're sharing a different document, you need to click share screen and select that window.
Sorry, guys. Let me pull it up. More. I think my children just woke up. It'll take me a second. But anyways, we start off with doing a paper about the history of golf. And so they learn all about the history of golf. Lots of them like to talk about the Augusta Nationals. And then there's a YouTube video, I'd have to find it, that gives like a drone tour of the Augusta Nationals. And so I show that. And then after that, they start looking at golf courses, like maps of golf courses in our area. And then they have to design their own golf course. And so they get to choose if it's going to be 9 or 18 holes. Again, typically these are my guys in the class, so it's a little bit sports related. So it's a little bit more fun than, for them, because then they like to do like the trick shots and stuff like that. They think that they made it a really hard par. And then I also have, I think Taylor Brown created an amusement park one. It's also on the Ag Teacher Share Drive. And so these are just some really good projects that they can do in class. I'm trying to figure out how to do these virtually. I'm probably going to have to create boxes with paper and the proper tools. I'm just worried about getting those things back. So anyways, these are two projects that I do in nursery landscape. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Katrina.
Yeah. While we're waiting on some questions that may come from Katrina, type them in the chat. I did have a question. Somebody sent me a private message for Bill. Do you have, Bill, if you're still around, do you have a place where your videos are at that people could access?
I'm trying to figure out how to do that. You know, I shared a few of them with Alicia and thought maybe she might would use them in one last thing, but and then when Walt asked me could I share a bunch, you know, he wasn't the only one that had asked to see them. I tried to set up a Google Classroom and I was just going to invite people into it, but then I don't think my Google Classroom worked because he wasn't in my school system. So I sent an email to Katrina to see if I couldn't join the Google Ag Teachers group. Is there a possibility I could put them in there? So I don't mind sharing them with anybody, but when I have to do it individually to each person, I would rather have them in one place and let people just click on if they care to see them, you know.
Yeah, we could put them in the Google Share Drive for sure.
Force them on anybody.
I have several of them, Bill, now, and I can go ahead and upload them to the shared drive.
All right, that'd be great, Walt.
But since we don't have any more questions for Katrina, Jesse Bohannon is going to share a similar activity, and then we'll kind of group them together, and y'all can ask either one of those or both of them their questions. Go ahead, Jesse.
Sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. Okay, so I do the same activity as Katrina with the gingerbread houses, but my landscaping class is always offered in the fall. So we have one-to-one with the student iPad ratio. So our kids use a free app on the iPads called Home Outside. And if your students have iPads or something similar and you can use this, it's really good to get your kids interested in landscaping before you start doing the drawing, because it's a drag and drop type application. You can spin stuff, you can twist it. There are lots of different options. I was trying to see if I could pull up a few of these pictures just from Google Images, but I don't know if you can see, there are a ton of different options. There are tons of plants. There's lots of different types of hardscapes that they can use, brick patterns, stepping stones, you name it, it's probably on there. There's even swimming pools. So like you can see in this example, they create like a deck and then they can landscape around the deck. They can do, you know, a patio area, a fence, a driveway. It's really great. It works really good, especially when you are trying to make sure that they understand how things work together. It also works great because they can see the different colors and the different sizes of things once they start playing with this app. So first thing, we start off the class, they start playing around with the app. Sometimes I make them bell ringers where they just have to create a raised bed, and it has to include certain, I don't know, vegetable plants with a few ornamentals. And then every time it becomes a little bit more in depth to the point that they're no longer bell ringers, they're actually like mini assignments. So with the Home Outside app, they can create all kinds of things. Once they have made it to the end of the semester, again, my landscaping class is always in the fall. So once they've made it to the end of the semester, they have one final hand-drawn landscape project. And every student does their own. They have several days to do it. They have minimum requirements, just like Katrina set up. And hers is laid out much better than mine, may I add. I need to get a copy of her paper document. But I write on the board, you know, these are your requirements. And once they have met the requirements, I've come by and reviewed them. We've edited them together, and they have a final paper paper document. Then they go in the Home Outside app and they create their landscape in the app. Now, this particular landscape is a backyard landscape, and one of the requirements is that it has to have a shed. And I'll go a little bit more in depth with that in a second, but I have the whole list of requirements, and you can see on the screen, this is 2 of my amazing FFA members that they're both graduated now, so I'm missing them already, but they created this backyard design, and then they have to create the gingerbread house afterwards. So they're grouped together randomly. I put numbers in a hat and draw numbers. And some of the groups are 2, 3, 4. It just depends on my class size that year. But every year I buy the gingerbread village kit. It's like $10, and it has 5 of those little sheds. So $2 a piece for a gingerbread house. It would be more convenient if I could buy them when they were on sale. But again, because mine's in the fall, they're not going to be on sale then. So they can use the shed as one of the little village houses. And then I tell them they can bring in whatever food items they want. I also purchase Rice Krispie treats. And if you didn't know, they have sheets of Rice Krispie treats, which I thought was pretty awesome because you can mold them into different things. I buy ice cream cones, Twizzlers, little hard candies, sprinkles. The ones that are like sixlets work pretty good because they look like large flowers. Marshmallows work good. This group used shredded coconut. I think they brought that themselves. I don't think I brought that in. But you can see, I mean, it's just, the options are endless on what they could do. But this is their final project. So they're getting 3 separate grades. They're getting a grade, well, actually, they're getting 2 classwork grades and a test grade for their hand-drawn plan. Then they get a classwork grade for the Home Outside plan that matches theirs. And then their group, they grade each other on participation, and that factors into their overall group grade. So again, same thing that Katrina's doing, just a little bit of maybe extra steps. And if you have a hard time stretching that last part of the semester, you know, where they're telling you not to give them tests because they're already doing EOCs and final exams and all this other, they're not going to object to a gingerbread landscape plan. So if anybody has questions, that was really all I had.
Somebody asked, could you get this on Chromebook, or is there something similar to that on Chromebook?
Honestly, I don't know. We've had iPads the whole time. We've never had anything else, so I haven't looked. But if you just Google free landscaping app, usually you can come up with a few. I know there was a list of 10 whenever I searched for the iPad, and that Home Outside one was the best one I could find for the kids to use. It wasn't something I was going to have to keep walking through over and over again because everything was categorized. So it was easy for them to navigate.
Now, somebody asked, was it free? And somebody responded, it's $2.99. Is that true?
It was free for us, and we've had them on our iPads for about 5 years now.
We just looked it up on an iPhone here, and it was $2.99 on this one. It could be a different version, could be, you know, whatever. But
yeah, it could be the premium version. They may have to, because I know that there are certain plants and things that are listed as premium options. So that could be the way that it's listed. And you know that there may be another app now that's better, that's free. We've been using that one for several years. A drag and drop app works great for building interest and for them to be able to see scale, because I can come by and say, no, that plant is way too big. It's almost as big as your house. You gotta figure this out. So, and the gingerbread set that I got came from Walmart, and it is called the Gingerbread Village, and it comes with 5 small buildings, and all 5 are shaped differently. So when the kids are done and they're ready, they've decided on which plan for the group they're going to use, they come and get a shed from me. So.
Okay. I think we answered those questions. So LaDonna said, Garden Planner is free online for all devices. Nasty Whidden says sometimes if the iPad's registered to the school, apps are free. That may be the case. check with your local Board of Education. All right, cool. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Jesse. That was pretty awesome, man. Katrina. Those are both two great activities. Dr. Pickering, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you and let you share your screen if you need to.
All right, I have a few things that I'll share with you. I know some of the questions that we've had in all the breakouts have been about putting, virtual things and putting things online. And one of the things we had to do to get ready in case that happened for this fall was to update our pacing guides. So, I updated my pacing guides for all the courses that I teach. And, nursery landscape is one of those. So if you have to do that in the fall, or you start that way, or you have a portion of your students that way when we start, FFA and employability skills are a couple of the standards. It's pretty easy to do online things for that. I'm going to see if I can switch this to another window. I wasn't sure how this was going to work once we got in. I want to show you. All right, is this showing you the Georgia Best?
Yes, it is.
I found this when I was looking for employability skills materials to cover the employability standard, the things that I can make virtual, that I didn't have to completely write. I know a lot of you probably, when you sit down to teach, when you go in to teach class, you have these lectures in your head that go with materials that you have in class, but all the information for those is not written down anywhere. So it's sort of like making entirely new lessons. But I found this Georgia Best, and you can go to georgiabest.org, and it's run through University of North Georgia. All you have to do is sign up for it, and you can get to the teacher manual. They have employability skills lessons for elementary, middle, and high school level. It's a big manual, a lot of things, you wouldn't, I suppose maybe work-based learning, or if you use, the way we used to teach DCT, you might be able to cover all those things, but you can pick and choose some activities that work well for what you do from that. I put some of them in my lessons. That'll be virtual lessons as well as packets, because they have some things you can print. So I thought that was a good resource to share. Obviously, when I start nursery landscape, I start a plant science review, because they have to learn to, just be refreshed about, like Bill was talking about, leaf shapes, leaf margins, leaf patterns, leaf arrangement. And I usually do some sort of activity in the beginning that includes a dichotomous key. I get questions all the time, probably several a week. Somebody will send me a picture. Audrey, what's this plant? And they say, how do you do that so fast? How do you figure out what they are? And even if I don't know what they are, it's the skill of being able to use a dichotomous key and figure out just a few things about the plant, and narrow down what it is from that. So I'll start out plant ID, go from teaching plant science and plant parks and function, leaf shapes, leaf arrangements, and into classifying plants and using a dichotomous key. And that sort of gets them ready in any class, whether it's forestry or nursery landscape or horticulture, really, wildlife too, if you're or planning for ENR, to practice using a dichotomous key. Because if you purchase a good landscape identification book or any sort of identification book, it'll include a dichotomous one. And I try to have, I have some simple ones that I try to have the plants that are on that key, or the skulls that are on that key, whatever it is, for them to use in class. And they get, hands-on, using that material and using the key side by side, so they get practice using that key. And then, like everybody else, we go into plant identification. These controls keep going in front of what I'm trying to show you. I think it's right there. Sorry about that. Probably making weird faces. I've done this a lot of different ways, and we probably have about a third of the plants on the nursery landscape list on our campus. So that's handy, that I can take kids out and show them, in person different plants. And of course, I bring in samples. We do all that. I have press samples that we do. I've got a leaf press so we can save samples when we have them. But just pretty much by happenstance, when I started putting things on Google Classroom a few years ago, I wanted the kids to classify the plants, and I accidentally didn't make everybody a copy of the document. I was going to have them work in partners because that's what they do for this. But I accidentally didn't make each student a copy of this, so they were all starting to classify the plants on the same document, which was my original. And it turned out to be great because you could work through it pretty quickly. And, so then you could, say, okay, you do, these 10 and, or these 5, how many students you have, I divide it up evenly. And it gets them started on defining them as trees, shrubs, ground covers, and vines, and then deciduous or evergreen. And that gets that classification process working for them. So when they go to choose a plant later, when you are doing landscape design, they've got in their mind what type of plant, about what size plant, whether they want it deciduous or evergreen, and then it helps them associate the classification with the plant. And from that, in addition to doing, hands-on identification, I have them, this comes from the Google Classroom assignment that I had just had up, but we make a nursery landscape ID slideshow, and I've done it different ways. It just depends on how many students I have. If I have a lot of students, I may put them in fairly large groups, and then the groups divided up. But it's the last time I taught this, so we divided it up. So this group, this pair of students would take all the evergreen trees. This one would take the deciduous trees, etc. Obviously, the shrubs have to be divided up a little bit more than that, but I make them include on there at least 3 pictures with the whole plant, some close-ups, but I also make them include cultural requirements, because that's going to be important when they start to do landscape design, is that they know the cultural requirements of the plant that they're selecting. So I like for them to include the plant hardiness zone, as well as the sunshade requirements. And you can, you can get soil requirements. You can see if, they tolerate much wind, etc. How many hours, you can make it as detailed as you want. How many hours of sunlight does it need per day? Things like that. But obviously, like always, some students do better with the slides than others. This one didn't include the plant hardiness zone, but they did include some of the other cultural requirements of the plant. So they get an idea of, like Jesse was saying, the scale of the plant, the size of the plant. I like for them to put the mature size of it to get an idea, because when you're planting tiny little plants, it's hard to imagine how big they're going to get later on. Then the next thing that I do, I think this is the right one. I have been I've just finished my 23rd year, and I have been using this book ever since I did. We didn't have anything online then, and so you either had to make the material or find it. But this is an excellent material, and it was made by Ohio Ag Ed, but I don't really know how I had it to start with. But it's on Eric here. I wouldn't put it on. I'm not going to put it on the Ag Share, but you can look this up, Math for Horticulture, on Eric, and you can see where I'm going to download full text. You can download the full text, and because I don't know who put it there or if it's supposed to be there or not. I'm having trouble getting to the tab I want to show you. That's not it. My instructions are covering everything up. Where did it go? Okay, this is what I want to show you. This is the table of contents of Math for Horticulture. I don't know if any of y'all have it. I mean, some of y'all may have it. I don't know. But it's an excellent resource. Now, you could spend the whole semester using everything in here. You would not ever use everything in here. But whether you realize it or not, our kids aren't a measure. If they do learn to measure anything anymore before they get to us, often it's just a picture of a ruler on their materials and it's not to scale. So, sometimes when they get to our classes in high school is the first time they are really using instruments to measure. So this has English and metric things in it, and it has a lot of good horticulture and landscaping things that would help on the CDE. I noticed yesterday a lot of people shared using old materials from CDEs, and those are great too, but this is a great resource. So lots of formulas that they can practice. Lots of the business end of horticulture business. If you need to calculate how many, what you need for a fence, or teaches them about calculating volume for things. There's a lot of fertilizer calculations. You may have the Math for Agriculture book, that little book that has some fertilizer calculations for them to be able to figure out actually how many pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium you're getting in a mix. It's got a lot of those activities already set up for you. And it already has a lot of landscape plans, like just the site plan, a blank site plan there for you, that you can that you can use. So you don't have to try to come up with something that's blank, that is a small format. So it's a good way for them to practice. It's got you already passed it. Anyway, I teach them to use a scale. Obviously, the first thing we do when we start drawing is teach them to use a scale. I do like the idea of having them play around with a CAD application before to get some interest about how to do it. But I am old school also, and so teaching them to actually draw with the scale is important in lots of our classes. So obviously for landscaping, we generally use an engineer's scale, but the best scale to use for drawing landscape plans, because it kind of relates well to our it's easy to picture visually, is like an 8 scale or a 10 scale. So if you're using an 8 scale, you would have to use an architect scale for that. So I usually use 10 scale in class because that's what we use, an engineer scale for lots of other things. Anyway, there's lots of great stuff in here if you want to go and download this Math for Horticulture. Like I say, I don't know who scanned in this 300 pages and put it on Eric, but thank you to whoever did that. Let's see, I had a little list here. For drawing the plans, I also start with something small and give them something that'll fit. You get big packs of graph paper every year, and I start with something small and something that will fit at a decent scale on just a piece of graph paper. And later on, we'll, but I might do something like this, like and I'll show you the Smart Draw site. I need to renew my subscription. And I got to renew it when I can put in a purchase order for it. But anyway, with a real plan or on the computer, I give them some requirements that they have to have, like, what the hardscape is going to be, what the features would be. I tell them, we teach them how to do a site analysis. And so you have to consider, what's the surrounding property. And so I just make up things like, they've got some kind of bad neighbors and they need a screen for them, or maybe they've got a good neighbor and they don't need a screen from them. So that way it forces them to think about their plant material and what they're choosing for the purpose they're choosing it. Why would you put deciduous shade trees on the south end so you have shade in the summer and you let the sun in the winter? Thinking about their solar orientation, thinking about the microclimate that each plant would be planted in. So they select things that are going to do well based on how much sun they're getting, or the prevailing winds and things like that. So you can change it up. I mean, I joke around with them a lot, you're single, you've got a handsome neighbor, maybe you don't want to screen off his yard, just things like that to get them laughing and thinking about, the space around this landscape plan and what they would want to put in different places. And there are a couple of other things. Let's see, here's the
Dr. Pickering, let's go ahead and pause here.
Okay.
We've got a couple of questions, and then we need to save about the last 10 minutes for some
Okay.
ideas about distance learning. You've got some great ideas in there, and that kind of segues into the first question. I think Dr. Story wanted you to share some of your Google Classroom files. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I'll figure out how I can share, maybe just cut and paste some of those assignments into the Ag Teacher Share.
Okay.
Because like I say, we've been using it for about 3 years, so I pretty much got everything in there.
Right.
Modify it and slide it around, as you decide how to schedule. But I'll try. Is there another question?
Bill just added, and you mentioned about having plants on campus, and he says anytime that you have any extra money in the FFA or greenhouse account, buy some plants and plant them on campus. Pictures are good, but there's nothing like a live plant show to show kids. Yeah, that's very true. Right. Trees too. Let's see. A good free app for helping identify plants is Picture This. Eric Sellers said that. That's good. That's true. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I had a question kind of open for this, and I don't know, some of the folks that have been around longer than me, maybe you can weigh in, but has anybody ever thought about doing like a plant swap, where somebody's responsible for growing a small crop of a certain plant, and then you all meet up and just exchange? Is that something that's been done among ag teachers?
There have been a couple of workshops I've been to that we got to do things like that, but it wasn't necessarily, okay, you bring me whatever. I know a few years back we did a great workshop at Callaway Gardens. We did obviously tours and things, but we got to get cuttings of their plant materials, which was excellent. And then we've had some forestry ones where you know, we were able to get samples. But as far as, I haven't been to one that was specifically, say, nursery landscape, that we did a plant swap, but you could probably do it without even having to grow it, you know, just send out a list, hey, who's got
I know that we did this in Central Region several years ago at a area teachers meeting. I think folks brought some plants that they shared, some extra house plants and things from the greenhouse. So that'd be a great idea for everybody to do. Chansey Coleman says we share within the county. That's good. And Kristen Wilson said, especially with perennial shrubs and tree ID. That's very true. Okay. Does anybody have anything that they specifically have thought about or have used in the past or are going to use this next year to address distance learning in the specific area of nursery landscape? And I know Dr. Pickering has showed, she's still sharing her screen, these things that she has in her Google Classroom. There's some really great things there. Anybody else?
So I have a resource that I found and I shared with Miss Pollard and the other ag teachers here in Newton County. I ran across it just this year. If I could share my screen. But it's through the
You should be able to share now, Michael.
all right, thank you, sir. It's through the University of Idaho. And can y'all see that? Yeah, it's coming up. But it's through the University of Idaho, and they actually have like a whole Department of Education and Extension, and they have a section that's specifically on nursery and landscape design and management. So they have drafting equipment and all kinds of stuff. They actually have a PDF lesson plan with like worksheets and stuff like that. I have a picture of those too. Here it is right here. But the lesson plan, like it has a table of contents, you can go all the way down. It has symbol sheets, and it has like plan your own design, flower designs. Also get down here to the bottom. But it has some other class stuff. But it's a great resource. I started using it this year after I found it, and then but I mean, y'all are more than welcome to go on there, and if you need the link to that, it's I'll share it. I'll also put this a share thing so that y'all can find it.
Just type that link in the chat
yeah, I'll
box.
type the link in the chat box so that y'all can get to that. But that's what I use, and I wanted to share that with you all.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? That's a good idea, Dr. Pollard. That companies that build homes and have landscapes and blueprints, rather, that when they get done with them, they give those to y'all. That's great real world examples. Would be really good for students to see. That's good. Yeah, building those community relationships is very, very important, especially new teachers. That's very good advice for you. Make sure you do that. You can get free plants and seeds and landscape materials and all kind of things from local folks. Allie Crockett says we have teachers that allow us to come landscape their homes. We draw the plans, they interview the customer, etc. That's good. Any other distance learning activities?
I don't have a. Oh. Sorry, Michael and I are in the same room. So anyway, I don't have a link or whatever, but there's a piece of equipment that I have in my aquaponics lab that I think that would come in pretty handy if anybody's trying to take cuttings and replicate plants, you know, and increase, you know, pretty rapidly. There's a piece of equipment called Turbo Clone, and essentially it's kind of got like a little greenhouse look, you know, like a plexiglass covering, and it's got a foam circular collar that you can, you know, take cuttings and insert the plant into. And then up underneath that is a reservoir that is just for water, and you can put root hormone in, and it sprays the underside of those cuttings. And so I've taken cuttings. Some plants work better than others, but it's a, you can buy the different sizes of that turbo clone equipment, and you know, you can have, I think the one downstairs will make, it's got collars for like 80 something plants. And so I can, you know, take a bunch of cuttings at one time and start some root growth and for transplant. And it's been really successful. So just check out that piece of equipment. It may be worth it to you.
There's a picture of it. Is that what you got, Marcus?
Yeah, that's what I've got. I'll turn on my phone.
That's pretty cool. Dr. Katrina Pollard said we also do a unit on power tools. Students also have showed they can use all the pieces of equipment, including starting them on their own. That's pretty good. Some of them don't know how to start string trimmers and lawnmowers. That's true. Caroline asked, Allie, do you have students figure out prices for the teachers, or do you have some set price list, and does it serve as a moneymaker for your chapter? You mind addressing that, Allie? She's still here?
Yeah, she said it's not a moneymaker, but they've done it
Okay.
several different ways. She doesn't have
She doesn't have
microphones.
microphones,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we have approached the hour mark, and we trying to keep these to an hour to be conscious of your time. I think there's been some great resources shared. These things keep getting better and better. This is our 7th one that we've done, and these are just getting better and better with folks sharing more and more things. I was kind of worried they'd kind of run out of ideas